Hi, everybody. My name is Gary Sankary. I am industry manager here at Esri, looking after the retail and real estate industries. I've got a long history in the retail business, 30 years with Target, and have spent a lot of time trying to understand how we make decisions and make the best decisions about locations and where we want to put our stores and distribute DCs and that sort of thing. For today's webinar, just a couple housekeeping things. First of all, feel free to ask as many questions as you like. There is a Q&A tab in your screen if you want to post those questions. We are monitoring that, and as they come in, we'll get your questions answered. We may have time to answer them as part of the webinar. If we don't get to them, they will be answered and you will get responses. So please do ask your questions. Secondly, if you have any kind of technical difficulties, please go into the chat and let us know about that. We're also monitoring that. This webinar will be recorded, and you will get an email to everybody who's registered. So if you're listening to me, you will get a copy of the recording, and you will also get a copy of the presentation, and as well as some additional information for you you can, for our own website, where you can find out more information about some of the things that you're seeing today. So with that, I think without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Eric Pollard.
Great, thanks, Gary. As Gary said, I'm Eric Pollard, and I lead the Consumer Goods and Services practice at Esri Professional Services. I work closely with CCIM, serving as the CCIM Strategic Advisor, specifically with Carol Campbell and Ben Wilson on your ArcGIS platform. So today's webinar, we're going to cover some improvements to the Site to Do Business application and some new functionality termed MapSite. And so what we'll cover today will first be an overview of the Site to Do Business tool for those that are not aware of what this tool is. We'll then get into those enhancements that I talked about. We'll also talk about some simplification of some of the standard workflows that you may have used in this tool already. And we'll also talk about some core application improvements that have been made over recent releases. And then finally, we're going to touch on a bit of the future of the Site to Do Business application and what's to come. So first, Site to Do Business. Site to Do Business is a real estate-centric application that combines a number of workflows, data, mapping, and analysis all in one easy web interface. This web interface is built on top of the ArcGIS and Business Analyst platform and is available to all the CCIM members. You can see some of the core functionality listed in these bullets, things like mapping and visualization, different types of analysis and presentation capabilities, creating demographic and other reports, creating interactive infographics, doing things like market analyses and market studies, site selection workflows. You'll see some of that a little bit later today. Also in this tool is a large amount of data, as I said earlier. Some of the specifics are demographics, psychographics or profiling of the population, and business point data. In addition, some of the specific tools that we're going to talk about are things like site suitability, a way to score and rank individual sites, gap and void analysis that allows you to find areas of missing either retail or other businesses, trade area creation, everything from drive times to straight ring distance, and one we'll talk about today called threshold trade areas. And again, that reporting. The reporting is something that I'm sure you all have seen before, the Site to Do Business and Esri demographic reports. And so again, this is all built on top of the ArcGIS online software platform. That's important because not only do you have this interface, but for those that are a bit adventurous and want to explore more into the ArcGIS interface, you also have the ability to create things like dashboards. You can use mobile applications, and there's other functionality built in as well. So again, Site to Do Business is the premier technology tool for CCIM Institute and for all the real estate professionals. Now let's get into what's new. So there's been a lot of enhancements recently, and one of those is going to be termed the MapSite workflow. And so this MapSite workflow is live and active now, and it allows you to make market maps more easily with less clicks, and it's going to give you a product that you can easily export, share, print, and otherwise use throughout your business. And so within that MapSite workflow, you're able to select a series of nationwide variables. Some of them are local. So for instance, parcels within a municipality. And some of them cover the entire nation, which you'll see soon, like Hex Bins for income across the country. Now, those layers are also filtered and curated. You'll see how we can use things like the map extent to filter for those layers. We can use content categories, as you see here in the screenshot. And we can also choose layers that are either local or nationwide based on their classification. You also now can easily add multiple layers at once. So no longer do you have to click on an individual layer, add it, and then go back to that add data screen. You'll see that here in a minute. You can also search for those layers by name or by the municipality name as well. So these are all easily able to be added alongside other data that you've traditionally seen in the Site to Do Business application, as well as your data that you bring into the system. So for a bit of a demo, I'm going to flip over live, and we are doing this live, over to the application itself, and we're going to start. So first, we need to choose an area that we want to go to. I'm going to select the zoom to an area, and I've just chosen earlier today to go to Bellevue, Washington. So we will zoom into Bellevue. Maybe some of you are familiar with the area. So what we're going to first do is look at what data we have available for Bellevue. I'm going to go up to the Add Data sub-tab on the top left. I'm going to choose Web Maps and Layers. What you're now going to see is a new category called stdb MapSite. I'm circling it right now with my mouse. So this category is specifically for CCIM, and this is going to contain all those layers that I just talked about, both the nationwide layers and the categorized layers based on type. So what you can see over here in the categories on the left is a series of different tags that data is categorized by. This amount of data currently is going to increase over time. We have a series of municipalities and cities and metros that are populated already. The CCIM Institute team is working to continuously add more and more data into here. What you also see is a subcategory called nationwide hex bins. We'll get back to that in a minute, but that's where you'll find your nationwide variables. So first and foremost, I have a couple options. I can choose to search for layers. So I may come up here and search for the name Bellevue as a municipality, and I can see a series of layers that pop up. One of the layers that I might be interested in is something like major building projects. Rather than just choosing open and having to come back to this pane and add another layer, I'm going to check this multi-select box. So that multi-select box is going to check that on and add to the one selected title up at the top. I then may also want something like permits. So I'm going to check that box on. I now have two selected, and I can continue to do that and select as many as I want and then choose add selected when I'm done. Before I do that, I want to show you one more button. We're not going to use it in today's example because we've already zoomed in and chosen our layers. But if you are unaware of what layers may be available to you, you can zoom into a municipality and you can choose the filter by map extent button here. What that does is that will actually filter the available data layers to be only those layers that are available in the extent of your map frame. So right now we've chosen our two layers, we've selected them, and I'm going to choose add selected in the bottom right. So now you see one of them's turned on. That's the major building projects. What you want to be aware of is that these data layers are actually coming from different municipalities and their IT and GIS departments around the country. Some of them are set to only show when you're at certain extents. So I've chosen this specifically to show you that when we zoom in a bit and we move into these building projects, you'll also start to see the permits turn on. So we'll give it a moment. We'll zoom in one more, and we will see the permits start to populate. And they will be little red dots that will populate in a moment. All right, looks like we'll add a different data layer for now. That one was working this morning. Let's go ahead and turn on business listings. So occasionally, oh, I'm sorry, that just took a little while. So do be aware, we're sometimes at the mercy of the speed of the local government's data servers. And this is a great example, so I should have been a little more patient. You can see they did pop in a little bit longer than we expected, but here they are. So what I can go ahead and do is click on any of these and take a look at what the attributes are for that location. So this is Squire's Auto Work. It's obviously a permit that was given out to build or renovate or construct this location. You can see there's a series of different attributes in here. You can look at all these. Many of them are even things like live links that you can click on and go out to another website for more detail. So lots and lots of information for each of these. Again, you see the major building projects in these larger circles. So if I were to click on any of these, you can actually see the neighborhood information, and I can choose different features from within there. So now we've shown you how to turn some of these on. What are the things that we can do from here? Well, if we're happy with this map and we just want to share where these major building projects are and some of these permits, we can go ahead and go over to the right-hand side and we can do things like create a PDF, right? Or we can even share this map to ArcGIS. What that does is it makes a live digital copy of this map with these layers on that you can then go into the ArcGIS interface to map even further. You can add labels, you can change colors, you can stylize that map how you want. So those are two things we can do. But we can take this even further. We might want to add things like those nationwide hex bins that I talked about a minute ago. So maybe I want to see the major building projects with the nationwide hex bins. What I could do is I could turn off these permits by going over to the clear over here and choosing Bellevue permits and clearing those off. Now I have just these major building projects. I'll zoom out a little so we see a larger area and we see these major building projects. Now I want to go back to add data. And I want to go to Web Maps and Layers. And what I want to choose this time is my nationwide hex bins. So in here, I'm going to drop down nationwide hex bins. You'll see you have smart mapping, 1 mile, 4 mile, and 16 mile. We'll come back to smart mapping. Those are going to be used specifically in our smart mapping interface. For now, I'm going to choose the 1 mile hex bins. These are just the size of the diameter of the hex bins, which you'll see in a moment. Now you'll notice if you have a search in here, you need to clear that search so that it doesn't key on that word. Now what you can do is use that search again to search for specific types of data. So in this case, I might want to add something like income. So I'll type the word income and hit enter. I have a series of income variables that pop up. You'll see the title down here, and in some cases where the title is long, if you hover over, you can actually see what the full title is by doing that. Now, maybe I wanted median household income, right? You'll notice there's a couple of median household incomes. What you'll want to do is hover over the name, and you'll see those first 2 letters at the end of the name. It says median household income 1 mile CY. CY is for current year. If I wanted previous year, I would find the one by hovering over that says PY, previous year. So do note that there's current year and previous year variables for many of these. So for this one, the median household income 1 mile, again, I'm going to take the current year, I'm going to check that on, and I'm going to add that. So you'll see here now, these are 1 mile hex bins. Obviously, we want to zoom out a little bit just so that we can get that larger Bellevue area. You can see lots and lots of hex bins across the map, right? Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit more just so that we get kind of a regional view. And I can see my building projects on top of it. So this isn't the only thing I can do, right? I see these dots, but I don't see the information on the base map behind there. I may want to go over to my legend, go to my map contents, and go to my Alteryx 1 mile hex bins, choose this little ellipse, and choose transparency. I can make these somewhat transparent so that I can still see the map information that gives us the cities, the highways, etc. So now I can see a little bit more information in my map. I can see where the income is more or less aggregated, and I can also see those building projects on top. Again, I could print this map or I could share it out to ArcGIS to create additional mapping products. One other thing I may want to do is filter these. So the ability to filter is going to be found over in the Project Explorer. So as I go down, you'll notice that as I was adding those layers, they get added to this Web Maps and Layers section. Down here, you can see the median household income and the Alteryx 1 mile hex bins, both with little ellipses to the right. So if I choose the Alteryx 1 mile hex bins and I choose this filter by attributes, I can check that on. And what that'll do is it'll actually set a filter. Now I can actually adjust that filter if I want. So I can go in here, drop this down, right? And I can see my ranges for this filter. I can also go in here, choose the filter by attributes title, and start to adjust this filter. Now I was playing with this a little earlier just to show you what a good filter might be. In this case, I chose a higher income range. But if I wanted to adjust this, I could slide this down and we could see more. Or if I wanted to look for lower income, I could slide that way and slide this one to the left. And now I'm looking at lower median household incomes across the Bellevue area. Again, you can type in exact variable amounts right here for mins and maxes, or we can just use these sliders and start to explore the map. Now, if you're finished with the filter and you want to see all of the hexagons again, I can hit the clear filters button and done, and I'll no longer filter that map. So hopefully that shows you a little bit about how to use MapSite, how to use this add data functionality, how to choose web maps and layers, and how to navigate this content based on any municipality or area of the map that you're in. So now we'll go back to Gary for a moment to see if he has any questions from the audience.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, actually, we had a few questions come in. I'll just kind of do them in the order. First of all, there was a question about, does this data work for Puerto Rico? We have some of the folks on the line work in Puerto Rico.
Yes, so we're always at Esri making enhancements and improvements to the data that we have. What I want to be clear about is that some of the data within the Site to Do Business application comes from Esri, and some of it comes from CCIM Institute and their data subscriptions. For instance, this UltraX data is something that CCIM Institute has available to them and that we've loaded into this application. Carol Campbell, and then Wilson would be able to talk to you about the progress for adding those types of variables into the system for the UltraX Hex Bins. For Esri's data, we do cover Puerto Rico with a series of variables, and you can use those in conjunction with this map. But for the UltraX variables, for the moment, I believe it is the 50 US states. We can definitely follow up with some more information from Carol and team on what will be the progress of that data in the future.
Very good. Another question about when you showed the permits, were those all active permits?
Yeah, so this is a really good point to make. Within this add data and site to do business MapSite functionality, these are actually pulling from live GIS layers from all of the municipalities, typically county GIS systems across the US. So at any point in time, it is as up to date as that county GIS system is. In our experience as the leaders in GIS, it tends to be that the more urban and more well-known metros are very up to date. You may find that some of the most rural areas of the country may be a little bit more out of date. To find more information on that, I would definitely recommend that you go to a municipality's GIS site through a simple Google search and take a look at what their most recent vintage is if you want to explore more. Again, a lot of the information in the permit example specifically is actually right in the attributes. So turning those on, for example, at one of these major building projects, you see a series of attributes in here. In many cases, there is a date issued. You can see a creation date right here for this project of April 5th, 2022. So that's actually today. So that was something very recent. So again, you'll find some of that information in there. Others you can research on the county GIS.
Perfect, because we did have some questions about the dating on the data. One question, Eric, that came up was had to do with municipal zoning and different kinds of zoning. Do we have layers, data layers that talk about zoning?
We do. So within the add data and within the categories, you'll see that we have planning, zoning, and development. That's a series of layers that obviously would include zoning. We have address and boundaries. We have engineering layers, infrastructure layers, safety and environment, and economic layers. And there may be some others that are added in the future. These aren't set in stone, but they certainly are a good categorization of the majority of layers that we have up to date.
And in terms of the current zoning would be as fresh as the data from the municipality. Right.
Exactly. That goes back to the same answer as before, as fresh as that municipality is offering.
Got it. Do you have another question came up about future land use?
Yes, so future land use would be in that planning, zoning, and development group. Many of the layers that have been already categorized are the municipality's land use plan. So much like the zoning, right, it'll have polygons that show what the intended use of that land is. I'm sure most folks know land use planning on this phone call. So definitely take a look for those in those different municipalities. Again, if we don't have it yet, it's very likely that it will be added by the CCIM Institute team.
Okay, and I think we don't have time for one more in this section, but really quickly, when you talked about Puerto Rico, we also have folks from Canada, the same question being answered.
Yes, so again, that would be the same for Carol in terms of Carol Campbell and her team in terms of roadmap for the UltraX variables. From the Esri standpoint, we do have variables for Canada. While I won't switch it right now, just because we're in a demo session here, up here on the top right, you'll see the drop down where it says USA right now. you'll see a series of different countries up here that you can switch the application to. Canada is absolutely one of them, and you can leverage the data there. As of right now, within the MapSite functionality, it is the 50 United States, and that roadmap may be answered again by Carol at a later point.
So I think let's stop for now. We do have a lot of questions I think we can answer offline about what types of data are available, and I know that we need to move on with the rest of our demo. So thanks everybody for asking questions. We are keeping track of them, and we'll answer what we can as we go.
Okay, so I'll continue on to the next section. So in addition to some of those new MapSite functionalities, we've also talked about the fact that we have simplified site-to-do business workflows. These are going to allow you to perform your analyses faster, easier, and really have kind of one-button answers to be created. And so what you see here is some of the things that we've improved. We've had a preset suitability criteria and weighting, which I'll show in a little bit. That's going to allow you to, with one click, set a series of variables to weight and score geographies or sites based on the intended use. There's also a curated list based on property type, so things like office, retail, multifamily, et cetera. And you see that right here in this box towards the bottom of the slide. There's also preset comparison reports, which we'll show in a minute. Very much the same in terms of having a set of variables already chosen for different land use types. And there's also preset color-coded maps. This just allows a little bit faster way to map those variables that are typically most important to you as a real estate professional. So I'm going to go into that demo right now. We'll kick back over into this. And what we're going to do is we're going to clear our map. Let's choose that. We'll start with a fresh screen here. So what we can now do is select some sites that we can show some of these presets for. I'm going to choose define areas and select geography. I'm going to choose back here. I was doing this a little bit earlier, so we use the same ones that I used earlier. We'll choose zip codes. Now you can select a series of zip codes by clicking on the map. I've pre-chosen 6 zip codes here. These are just all kind of in the heart of the Bellevue area. Make sure that you do not combine these into one site. I want to compare them one to the other, and I'll go ahead and choose next. Now I see I have a series of zips out there, and I have the ability to run reports, run infographics, do a suitability analysis or comparison reports. Let's start with the suitability analysis. You'll see it has my 6 sites already selected. I'll confirm that I want to use all 6. And now you'll see that you now have 5 different preset land use or property types that you can choose from with a single click. Rather than having to build these lists individually, these are now set for you by CCIM. So we could choose industrial, multifamily, office, medical. In this case, I'll choose retail. So by clicking on this retail suitability list, you'll notice that instantly all of my sites, in this case zip codes, are now ranked and scored using our suitability scoring process and analysis with the preset variables on the left-hand side. You notice there's 7 variables that were chosen, everything from growth rates to total pop to apparel and services expenditure, et cetera. Now, if you want to adjust or alter this list, that's absolutely possible. You can choose to delete any of these, and you can even add additional criteria if you want. But what's great is this gives you really a well thought out and curated list of variables instantly and allows you to score the different areas. Here in the map, you see that the Northeast zip code 98052 is the most suitable for retail out of these zip codes in the map. So that's a very easy way to turn on suitability. You then again can share these. You can print this map, right? You have capabilities to then collaborate on this. Additionally, what you can now do is you can run some suitability reports. So I can go up to my reports tab. And now what I can do is I can add sites. So I have a series of sites, right, from all those zip codes that I chose. I'm going to choose all of them. Hit apply. And now what you see is instantly I have a different number of comparison reports available to me off the bat. You see they start with the words stdb or site to do business. I have a generational breakdown, medical demand, labor force, retail sales, and housing potential. Any of these, for instance, retail sales, will give me preset criteria or preset variables, and it'll give me that information for each and every one of these sites. From this point on, I can use this just like I would any other comparison report. I can flip the X and Y axes so that the variables are on the left and the sites are on the top, or I can leave it as I had it originally. I can always export this out if I want using the bottom right-hand button. I can print this, and I can even expand if I had different drive times or different trade areas. So very, very easy to toggle between these and see the different types of comparison reports comparing each one of these. So now what I'd like to do is show you one of the last capabilities that's been simplified. So in the maps, I may be happy here with how I've done my site suitability, but I may want to map a variable behind this data and understand how these zip codes intersect with a specific variable. So in the Create Maps subtab, I have our color-coded maps capability. I'm going to hit that button. Now, what you're going to see is that we now have a popular variables tab or subtab over here that has a series of variables pre-chosen for one-click easy mapping. So again, I was talking about kind of a retail analysis here. I may want to understand where the workers are in this area. So I may hit the daytime population workers. And with one click, very quickly, I now have a color-coded map of the daytime population of workers by block group, shown underneath my key sites. Again, I can always go over to the legend and I can adjust things like the transparency for my sites if I can't see those variables all that easily. So I can make it a bit clearer if I want to, or less clear, etc. So again, I have full mapping control. I can export this out and I can share it back to ArcGIS. So let me stop here. This shows some of our key simplifications. Gary, I'm going to go over to you to see if there's any questions on these key simplifications.
Thanks, Eric. Right now, just a couple have to do with if you can run these analysis on any polygon that you create, and specific. And then a question, actually, that's really the one that's right now. The rest we'll answer afterwards.
Yes, the answer is yes. I chose zip codes just because it's very easy to demo and everybody knows what zip codes are, but you could absolutely create sites, right? So you could drop pins or enter addresses. You could create drive times. You can bring in any other polygon shape from your data, right? So you can run them on any polygon that you like, and it'll work in the same function with both the suitability as well as the comparison reports functionality also.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we'll go back to the slides. So we've shown some of those workflow simplifications. Do note that we're a little bit time bound today, so we're not going to be able to show every single improvement. You may find some other nice improvements throughout the application, specifically in some of these core site to do business enhancements that have been released in prior updates to the software. Some of the key ones are things like threshold trade areas. So threshold trade areas we'll show in a moment is the ability to essentially create trade areas based on reaching a maximum quantity of a given variable, for instance, population. And we'll show what that means in a minute as we go into a live demo. Also, the gap and void analysis improvements. So you'll notice here a screenshot of some of the updated template and interface to do a gap or void analysis. Again, that's being able to compare a sample or reference area to target areas, right, or analysis areas to see if they are over or under saturated with specific retail or business types. In this little screenshot example, it's comparing an analysis area to a reference area of coffee shops and seeing if it's over or under indexing against that reference area. Also, batch infographics. So this is a request that a lot of folks have been asking for a while. Can we produce a series of infographics without having to click through and execute on each and every one? That simple capability has now been input into the application, but really provides you with a time-saving technique and maneuver. And also data updates. And I'm going to show you that on the next slide. So when we talk about data updates, why is it so important right now? It's really because the 2020 census data has been collected and it's now being processed by the Census Bureau and other agencies. And so we have a roadmap that is going to help illustrate how that data will be rolled out to the site to do business users. So what you see here is what's available today on the upper row, and what you see available come June on the lower row. So you'll notice that the 2010 census geography, which is what's been in the application for over 10 years now, has obviously a lot of the updated data available today, all these different types, but again, allocated to or aggregated to the 2010 census geography. Come June, we'll have much of that same data, right? That'll still be available, you know, for the you know, different types of data that we have for 2021. But the 2020 census geography is where we'll see some changes. So right now we do have the census redistricting within the application. And for those of you that don't know what that is, that's essentially the reallocation of different census areas to different governmental districts. Below that, you'll see in June 2022 is what's to come. So you're going to see 2022 data released for the 2020 census districts. So forward one there. So you'll see all that information that really mirrors what you see in the 2010 census districts, but they'll now be available in the 2020 census geographies. You'll also notice that you'll have a drop down to select your differing data sources. That is because there will be more variables right now available for the 2010 census geography, as you can see, over 8,000 of them, as compared to the 2020, but again, that will increase over time. So this is a really good view of the roadmap and that transition to the new census geography that really happens every 10 years. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into some of the core improvements that we saw previously, specifically the threshold trade areas being one of the new techniques. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to do what I did earlier and clear my map. All right, and now I'm going to use just a fictitious location. I'm just going to choose to add a location at the center of Bellevue. It so happens to kind of be at an intersection that does have some building near it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go into the Run Analysis subtab, and I'm going to go into the threshold areas. So this is new, the threshold trade areas technique.
Eric, really quickly, before you do this, I think a poignant question I wanted to interject. There's a question about, can you include data that's outside of Esri or CCIM Institute?
Yes, so you absolutely can. Yes, absolutely. So within the add data functionality, you do have the ability to choose this third tab, custom data setup. There is a process there that'll run you through that allow you to add additional data that you can then report on and aggregate. To learn how to do that, there's a great little watch video button down here. And we also have help out on our blog as well as, again, Carol Campbell and Ben Wilson being able to help point you in the right direction.
Okay, and last, how many addresses can they add into a map?
Yes, so it does depend on how you bring the data in. There's different techniques. So with this simple add data functionality and import file, it is a little bit less limited, or excuse me, a little bit more limited than it would be through adding other data from other services, let's say municipalities. So in here, you do have a 5 megabyte size limit, right? And that's for Excel and CSV files. That's really going to be dictated based on how many columns of data you have. The more columns of data, the less total records you could add. You can also use zipped shape files. If you do use this technique, it's 1,000 or less records that can be imported. So just be aware of these limits. You can import them that way. There's also other ways to import data. So using the ArcGIS.com interface will allow you to create a file with more records, and you can then bring it in through this add data, web maps, and layers. Again, that's a little bit of a more advanced technique, but you certainly can reach out to Carol Campbell, Ben Wilson, and they can certainly help you out with that.
Okay, back to it. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. So we've added our point for Bellevue, Washington. We want to show the threshold trade area technique. So in the run analysis, I'm going to hit the threshold trade areas. I'm actually going to go back here and just finish this. So I was testing this a little earlier, so we'll do this again. Run analysis threshold. And so you'll start with this pane right here. So you'll see where it says choose a starting method. You can use a point layer that's already in your map, an existing site that you've already created, or in this case, I just want a single location, that little pin that I dropped. So I'm going to hit single location. It's going to find that single location I dropped in the map, which is the Bellevue, Washington pin. I'm going to choose next. Now, this is really where the magic happens. So threshold trade areas, as I said earlier, are going to expand outward in all directions based on either a straight distance or a drive time distance. For retail, I'd typically use something like a drive time distance. So I'm going to choose drive time, and it's going to expand outwards based on driving time until it hits specific thresholds. In this case, we have the total population as the threshold variable. This can be any variable at all. I can hit this change variable, I can browse for a variable, and I can use that entire data browser for those thousands of variables. I'll just leave it as population for today. what we can do is we can choose up to 3 thresholds. So the first threshold is set at 10,000. I'll leave it at that. I could alter it, but I'll leave it for today. I'll make the second threshold 20,000, and I'll make the third threshold 50,000. Now, again, you can set these to be anything you want, any variable amount. Do note that the larger and larger you get in terms of quantity, the more time it will take to process, because it obviously has to aggregate a lot more information. One other thing that you should be aware of is this gear icon. This gear icon is going to allow you to set how precise or how fast this application's function will run. And what that means is, do I need to be spot on or as close to spot on to these individual thresholds? Or do I need to be pretty close to them, but I don't really need to be down to the exact number? So if I wanted to be more spot on, I would drag this up to more precision. If I wanted to just do this more quickly and I didn't care if it was exactly those numbers, I would drag it to best performance. I'll leave it at balanced right now so you can see what that looks like. Again, you have the typical drive time creation parameters, things like driving towards, driving away, rural, trucking, etc. Right? You have lots of different options. I'll just leave it at the options that it has right now, and I'll hit create areas. So what's important to note is what's going on right now is it is actually drawing, creating, and aggregating population basically minute by minute, and continuing to refine and define what the size of that trade area should be to get as close as practically possible to those thresholds. Again, that precision gear is really what's going to make it take a lot more time to finish, or finish in a bit faster fashion. So this new site is being created. It already found those 10, 20, and 50,000 thresholds. It won't be exact. You'll see that it'll be slightly off of those numbers, right? Because we chose a balanced approach to make this go relatively quickly. It'll finish up by creating those actual polygons, right? They'll look like drive times, just like you've seen in the application before, but we'll know the exact thresholds, right, that it's going to produce those different areas at. So now what it's done is it's gone ahead and drawn those. You'll see it's used differing colors to show the 2.5 minutes, the 3.5 minutes, and the 6 minutes. Excuse me. And so what you'll see down here in the chart is you'll see what those actual thresholds are. So for the first threshold, for that 10,000, what it found was that it could get to 8,711 in a pretty quick manner and draw that in 2.5 minutes, right? The other two were a bit more precise, just shy of 20,000, right? 19,648, and then 51,664 in associated 3.5 minutes and 6 minutes, right? So that gives you that threshold trade area. I'm sure you all have probably worked with clients or customers who have asked, I want to be in an area with X amount of people within a certain driving distance, right? This would definitely give you that ability to create those thresholds and check that out. So let me stop there for a second. Hopefully that makes sense as to how we can go ahead and show those thresholds. What I also want to just highlight, but we're not going to run through it, is in the run analysis capability, that void analysis, again, has a lot of improvements, has an interface improvements and really ease of use improvements. So I highly suggest that you check this out. You can watch the short video and you really understand how to use new enhancements in void analysis. Now I'm going to do one more quick kind of surprise demo. I know some of the folks that I work with at CCIM Institute like to see this specific demo. So I'm going to show this and how this works. So I'm going to clear our map. And I'm going to go up to add data, and I'm going to go back to web maps and layers. And what I'm going to show is I'm going to show something called a smart map search using our nationwide Alteryx Hex Bins. So I'm going to go down to nationwide Hex Bins. I'm going to drop down this category. And if you remember earlier, I had said that we had 1, 4, and 16 mile, but we also have smart mapping, right? So these are exclusively used for this workflow I'm showing right now. So by clicking on smart mapping, and I need to make sure and clear any searches I have in there, you'll see the 1 mile, the 4 mile, and the 16 mile hex bins. Now, these are kind of special layers. They actually have all of the other variables, all those 141 variables wrapped up in each of these layers. So what I'm going to choose for today is the 1 mile hex bins. I'm going to check them on and add them. And you'll see that they're going to populate my map. Now I can go and do something that's very, very popular called a smart map search. So what I can do is I can go up to create maps. I can go over to the smart map search tab, And I now have a series of lists I can choose from or a browse all variables. Now I want to be very careful here because if I'm using these hex bins, I need to choose variables that are actually coming from the hex bins. So in this case, I need to choose the browse all variables. So I'll hit that. And what you'll notice is you'll be starting here on this pane, right? You'll see a series of different data browsing categories. You'll also see a new tab if you've added the hex bins called Map Layers. By choosing Map Layers, you'll notice that I have 141 variables associated with this Alteryx 1 mile hex bin group. I can scroll down and look at them and choose them that way. I can search by keyword, or I can just check them on as I see ones that I'm interested in. In this case, let's use a couple that might have to do with retail, right? So I'm going to choose daytime population as I had earlier. So I've chosen that one. And then maybe I'm concerned with the education attainment in the area for those workers. So I'm going to choose something like bachelor's degree. So I'm now going to hit apply. And you'll notice that I now have that same smart map search that you've been used to in the past, but it's now keyed in on these Alteryx hex bins. So for instance, if I were looking for a more educated group of the population, I could start to drag up the minimum % bachelor's degree, and you'll notice that areas are disappearing that do not meet the threshold for that amount of bachelor's degree. Same thing in the total daytime population. If I want more daytime population heavy, I can start to drag that slider. So you see, and I can also add in the individual variables, you can see how I can refine areas to find exactly what I'm looking for. Now, I just used a very simple example of 2 variables. You can add many variables in here. You can fine tune them and you can really find the areas you're looking for. You also can use larger hex bins. If you're looking across a state, you could use 4 mile or 16 mile hex bins. I recommend as you get into neighborhood type areas that you use the smaller hex bins, as you'll have a bit more granular result. So again, once I find these areas, I can do a series of things. I can go ahead and look at all of these hex bins and their values for everything that we've chosen. I can export these out to Excel. I can even use the map printing functionality again on the far right. So this is really a great tool, the Smart Map Search, that was previously used primarily with Esri's data and now can be used with the CCIM Institute's Alteryx hex bin data. So let me stop there. Gary, I'll go back over to you and see if we have any questions.
Thanks, Eric, and we do. So the first one I'll ask is for the daytime population, based on that timeline, do you know when as we're getting back to work, and is that influenced by, can we see how COVID is impacting daytime population?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. And so the daytime population is actually keyed off of the estimated number of employees of businesses along with unemployed people within an area. And so Esri has a series of demographers on staff that are always looking to estimate and update those data variables from year to year, including that information. Some of that information, as I said, comes from those business listings and their estimated number of employees. It's also basically powered by tax filings behind the scenes. So to answer your question about seeing the difference in COVID, right? You certainly are going to see a change in those estimated number of employees for those businesses from year to year. We haven't seen yet that there's any very clear pattern in all of the businesses either dropping or adding employees. However, I suspect that with more recent releases of the data, such as the June release, you may be able to dig in and figure out where those businesses have more or less estimated employees.
Sure.
Also, very importantly, just a quick note on that, Esri does make public our data methodology white papers. So I'm sure Carol Campbell, again, Ben Wilson can send you to that link. We can also post it in follow-up material, but we do have those publicly available. If you were to Google Esri data and methodology, you'll see a series of white papers that talk all about our sources and calculation methods.
Okay, a couple quick ones about the data. I know you showed how the time and traffic was calculated. Can you adjust? Are they adjusted for AM or PM, or can you look at segments of time, or is it for the whole day?
Yes, so you actually can go ahead and leverage time of day traffic. So if I were to go back into my threshold trade areas, and if I were to restart this, and let's do it again, and we'll just go ahead and drop a pin in a fictitious location. All right, and so if I were to continue with this, just to show you these capabilities, if I choose drive time, you'll notice that there's a use traffic button. I can always check that use traffic button on. I can even check on the traffic based on typical conditions for, and then I have the ability to set the day and the time of day. This is based on the averages for those days throughout the previous year and those times of days. If you want to learn more about all of that information, you can click on the Learn More here. And read more detailed information on our traffic metrics.
Very good. Really quickly, I also know the methodology statements that you discussed are also on the Site to Do Business Learning Center on the resource page, so you can get them there. A cartography question for you, Eric. Can we apply labels to the buildings, so brand names and icons and that sort of thing?
Sure. So where you're really going to experience more of the cartographic map making functionality is going to be in our ArcGIS.com interface. So as I said earlier, once you have a map that has the general data you want and is in the general region that you want, I highly recommend going over here and choosing the Share Map to ArcGIS if you want to experience our full cartographic effect. Having said that, we do have some capabilities over here to do what's called annotation, right? And so this button over here on the right on the toolbar that I'm hovering over says Add Annotation. So I could click on this button and I have the ability to add text into the maps, add shapes into the maps. I can freehand draw, I can add images. So you do have the ability in here to add these 4 types of categories of essentially labels on top of this map. For instance, let's say this was a proposed Starbucks, right? I could add in the word Starbucks, add to map, and then I can move this around, put it right there. Obviously, I could have styled it further, but I think you get the idea, and that you can add those labels into the map.
Okay, so last one, you showed us there were a couple different sizes of hex bins available. Are there any other options on hex bin size?
That is a great question, Gary, and we are going to see a slide that is a great segue into what's to come in the future of Site to Do Business and business analysts. So hold that question for my next set of slides.
Couldn't set it up. All right, I think that's it for now, Eric.
Okay, great. So I will go back to our presentation here. And hopefully we're seeing the slides. There we go. Okay, so to that point, the future of Site to Do Business, right? So we certainly have a lot planned for the underlying business analyst and the Site to Do Business application. So let me show you some of the things that are to come, and actually what has come in some of the recent releases. So let me also talk about a few things that we didn't get time to show. We talked about some of the void analysis updates, and again, I highly recommend you go in there and look at those. We also have some information on what's called new interesting facts within infographics. And so you're seeing a live little GIF image over here in the bottom right of an interesting key facts panel. If you're somebody who uses reporting or infographics, I highly recommend you check that out. It gives you kind of a pre-curated list of what are some almost anomaly or very deviated types of data for specific areas. What I mean by that, if you're looking at an area that is, let's say, much higher in income than many areas surrounding it, or maybe much more dense in population per capita, right? Those things would be interesting key facts because those are outliers in that specific region or area. So definitely check out the interesting facts capabilities will help you find out those unique things about a specific geography. There's also a new comparison infographic panel. So you see down here in this screenshot, a panel that is called comparison. What this is really meant to do is benchmark against either another site or area or against the United States as a whole. And it will show you that benchmark and comparison and how that site rates or ranks or indexes against a benchmark. There's also a link to a survey on the home page that I highly recommend you check out. Here's a screenshot of it here. So on the home page of the Site to Do Business application, you can go ahead and click on the provide feedback. You'll be given this survey. You can give feedback on any of the functionality, feedback on what you'd like to see next, feedback on how things are working for you. So we highly recommend that. There's also a blog out there, and you'll see this link in the leave behind that talks about a lot of these new enhancements that have just come out. On the next page here, you'll see a bit more of what's not currently in the application, but what is to come. And so what you're seeing highlighted here in these screenshots is what we're really highly anticipating and looking forward to. It's going to be an easy button for a market area study. So you can imagine having a very full featured report along with maps, along with data, infographic type element, etc., that will be able to be generated with just an easy search for an address or a longitude and latitude, and the hit of that go button. So you can see here, creating that market study is as simple as choosing the location, hitting go, and then getting a market study that you can then download. So look for that in the future. That's still being worked on, but something that I think a lot of members will like. We're also working on modernizing a lot of the functionality that you saw. So some of the color-coded mapping, some of the look and feel of that, some of the actual color ramps, the blendings of colors, etc. So you'll see a lot of the actual look and feel, the cartography updated in coming releases. And to that last question, Gary, that we had from the audience about Hex Bins. So we are going to be introducing the ability to easily create Hex Bins and aggregate information that either you bring to the table or Esri has into those Hex Bins and map those very quickly. And that's going to come out first within our desktop software, what we call our Business Analyst Pro, but will soon follow within the Site to Do Business and Business Analyst web application. So look for that soon. We'll certainly be releasing information on our blog about that. And as that time comes, you'll be made aware. Also, those 2020 census data updates that we talked about on the previous slide, do look for those this coming June. You'll see all that information now in the 2020 census geographies. Again, real quick reminder, anything that you have from a feedback or review standpoint, please go into the application. Please choose submit feedback and fill out that survey. So with that, we've covered a lot of the map site enhancements, the site to do business functionality enhancements, and hopefully showed you a few new ways with which you can work. At this point, we'd like to take any additional questions that you may have.
We have one. As soon as you showed what you've got, is there how soon will some of the market study capabilities roughly do you think would be available?
I wish I could answer that. I'm pretty sure my development partners would be upset with me if I took a guess. So I think as that gets a bit closer, we'll let you know. I wouldn't expect it anytime soon this year, but I think we'll have updates come later this year.
Okay. We also had a question about the Learning Center and how many How Do I videos are out there, and can they break these workloads into bite-sized pieces? And there's a number of 1 to 5 minute videos available for that.
Yes, so that's actually a really great point. On almost all the functionality in the application, you'll notice there's a little watch video under every one of these. And so under every one of those little watch videos will actually take you to YouTube if you want to view it on YouTube. And there's an entire playlist. They're all somewhere in the range of 1 to 5 minutes, as you said. I believe there's roughly a dozen of them, give or take a few. And certainly they're easy and bite-sized to watch. Having said that, we have a series of e-learnings now that are geared towards the business analyst web application through Esri's training sites. We certainly can relay that information to you with some of the leave behinds, and you do have access to take those longer courses as you please. Also, one last quick comment. We are working with the CCIM Institute with Carol Campbell again and Ben Wilson to do some further documentation of some of the functionality that I showed you today. So do expect some additional documentation on some of these workflows in the future.
Okay. I guess, okay, there's a couple that we're not going to get to. For the folks that are asking about a quick overview of the gap retail analysis, I think that would take a bit of another session, but we're happy to reach out offline and talk a little bit about that. We had a question about topo information, stream and wetland data, and I know that's in the base maps that they can look at some of that. Is that accessible also as a layer they can use for analysis?
Yes, so a couple things. We do have an environmental category, if you remember, and again, the CCIM Institute is working, hard working at adding more and more data into this. So in this environmental safety environment category, you'll see things that will be added in here, including things like wetlands. Also, remember, you always have the ability to go to what's called the Living Atlas, right? This is another tab, but this is curated from Esri. And you can search for content in here, things like wetlands or FEMA floodplains, etc. You'll notice there's a series of different things. For instance, this USA wetlands layer can be added alongside all this other information that we showed you.
Very good. I think that's all we have time for. Thanks for your time, Eric, and thanks for all of you who stayed with us. As a reminder that this webinar was recorded and you will receive a link for the download of the recording. Thank you for your attention. You'll also get some information about, you'll get a copy of the presentation, so we'll have a printout of that coming so you can review that as well. And also we'll have a link to Esri and some of the information. You can go right to our site as well and see some of the ways that we support real estate and how some of our real estate professionals are using our tools to manage their portfolios, to find sites to help their clients find the best locations for business, and also how they can, other data that might be available. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody.